Good morning, everyone. Our group will report about the Philippine literature. So, what is the Philippine literature? So, first of all, let us know what is our country. So, what is the Philippines? The Philippines is one of the most largest archipelago nations. It is situated in the Southeast Asia, in the Pacific Ocean, the Western Pacific Ocean. Its islands are classified into three geographical areas, which are the Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Because of its archipelagic nature, Philippines is one of the culturally diverse country, with its topography consisting the mountain terrains, dense forests, plains, and coastal areas. The Philippines is rich in biodiversity. It is considered one of the mega diversity countries in the world with a high percentage of flora and fauna indices. So, as a our Philippine country is a tropical country, which we are so rich and we are so lucky to to not experience winter. For me, based on my perspective, I believe that we are lucky to not experience that, because in other country it is very hard, and the money you cost in every winter is really high. So for me, I love our country for being a tropical one. So next up, history of the Philippines. The first people in the Philippines were hunter-gatherers. However, between 3000 BC to 2000 BC, people learned to farm. They grew rice and domesticated animals. From the 10th AD century, Filipinos traded with China, and the 12th century AD, Arab merchants reached the Philippines and they introduced Islam. So, Philippines um, was in the beginning were always loved by the other country to go here and influence us. So in 1521, Ferdinand Magellan sailed across the Pacific. He landed in the Philippines and claimed them for Spain. Magellan baptized a chief called Hamabon, and hoped to make him a puppet ruler on behalf of the Spanish crown. Magellan demanded that the other chiefs submit to Humabon, but one chief named Lapu-Lapu refused. Magellan led force to crush him. However, the Spanish crusaders were scattered and Magellan was killed by Lapu-Lapu. Okay, I know this part. All of us know this since we were in high school. Next one is the Philippines is named a fact. Now, the Philippines is named after King Philip II of Spain, 1956 to 1598, and it was Spanish colony for over 300 years. The relative ease with which the United States dispatched Spanish squadron. Sorry for the noise of the chicken outside. Manila Bay was only beginning of what became a nearly 500-year American presence in the Philippines. The Philippines occupation of the Philippines occurred between 1942 to 1945, when Imperial Japan occupied the Commonwealth of the Philippines during the World War II. The invasion of the Philippines started on 8 December 1941, 10 hours after the attack of Pearl Harbor. So, Pearl Harbor is a U.S. military base. If you have watched the movie, and it is nice. It's a nice movie also. Yeah, tragic indeed. So next is the timeline of the Philippine literature. So let's go to our Philippine literature. In pre-colonial times, early times in 1564, an analysis of collected oral lore of Filipinos whose ancestors were able to preserve their indigenous culture by living beyond the reach of Philippine Spanish colonial administrators. So, as we all know that Spanish before was really strict and called us Indio, but no, no, no. We're not that. We are actually not Indio in some rural areas where we have a collected oral lore. Yes, in those area. So, next is the subject was invariably in the common experience of the people constituting in the village food gathering, creature and objects of nature, work in home, field, forest, and sea, caring for children, and etc. So, the main subject actually during those oral lore that are and other literature that was written in these pre-colonial times has one common subject, which is what the common experience. That's the thing. Um, in the most common forms of oral lore, like the riddle, the proverbs, and the song, which always seem to assume that the audience is familiar with the situations, activities, and objects mentioned in the course of expressing a thought or emotion. So with this, yeah, we're our ancestors write and utter those oral lore because of their emotions. That's the goal there. That's the main reason behind it. The language of oral lore, unless the prize was part of the cultural heritage of the community, like the epic, was the language of daily life. So, epic, study about kabayanihan, it is part of our, it is a language of their daily life before. So, that's the famous oral lore. Then, a native syllabary was in use before the Spaniards brought over the Roman alphabet. The syllabary had three vowels. The a, ae, so ae is only one, and u, and 14 consonants. The p, g, c, k, l, m, n, o, p, n, g, n, n, g, p, r, s, t, w, and y. But curiously enough, had no way of indicating the consonantal ending words. Yes, curiously had no way of indicating. It isn't indicated there. The perishable materials on which the Filipinos wrote were disintegrated, and the missionaries who believed that indigenous pagan culture was a handicraft of the devil himself destroyed those that remained. So as we all know that the Spaniards influenced us and they brought religion to our country, which is Christianism or the Catholic, like that. So they think that whatever or lore or something rituals that performed in the Philippines is part of paganism. So pagan culture is like studying about witchcraft, believing into things that that is against or it may not inclined with a certain religion. So like a culto, ganon. Yeah. So next, let's go to the American period, 1998 to 1945. With the Americans providing free education, many were given the chance to study, and English was used as the language of instruction. So if you're gonna compare the two of them, the Spanish and the American, here the American gave us the chance to speak English. So the literary genres that flourished during the American period were poetry, sarsuela, short story, and the novel. Poetry was written in the three languages, the Filipino, Spanish, and English, and in different dialects. Okay. Some of the known poets during the American period were Maximo Calao, Carlos P. Romulo, Maria Agoncillo, Paz Marquez Benitez, Salvador P. Lopez, Jose Garcia Villa, Carlos Bulosan, and many others. So I will not explain this part because it is sabotable. The Balagtasan, oh, we are, it is famous, especially during the araw ng wika. The Balagtasan, named after Francisco F. Balagtas. So, he is the founder. Charot. Is a debate in verse of political joust done almost spontaneously between protagonists to debate over the pros and cons of a certain issue. So it is it is a part, it's like a debate-ish kind of um, literature. The first ever Balagtasan was held in March 1924 at the Instituto de Mujeres with Corazon de Jesus and Florentin Colantes as rivals. Jose Corazon de Jesus, known as the Joseng Batute, became the first ever king of Balagtasan. So if we gonna confuse ourselves, so Francisco F. Balagtas is not the king of Balagtasan. It was named after him, and the first ever king of Balagtasan is Joseng Batute. Okay? The combination of the foreign language and the culture of Filipino-enabled fictionists produce great literary works. The public can now relate to the story because the public is also experience what the story has to say, and they can now understand the language being used by the writer. So it is nice that American really taught us their language because during this great literary works and fictionist, so the public or the old our ancestors before can relate directly without even translating it because the language was taught to them, unlike the Spanish, which is somewhat some people in a certain part needs to translate those written in Latin. Yeah, Spanish. So, timeline of Philippine literature. The last one is the post World War II during 1946 to 1971. So, post World War II is this after the Japanese post. I mean, the Japanese conquer. Yeah, the Philippine Japanese-ish time. The Philippine novel, whether written in English or in native languages, has remained social realist. So when we say social realist, it is written based on the social reality of the situation. For example, wars, what is happening right now. If you're going to relate right now, about COVID, about politics, about election, like that. Then, the combination of the foreign language and the culture of a Filipino-enabled fictionist to produce great literary works. The public can now relate to the story because the public also experiences what the story has to say, and they can understand the language being used by the writer. So, this is a combination of foreign and culture of Filipino. Yes. So, same as before, uh, on the American era, the public can relate to it because the language is kanang taught to them. But here also they can relate to it, but also with plus one reason, which is they can relate to it because the public also experience those matter that used, yeah, and the language is used by the writer. So these are the differences that I took for my report. I hope you understand, guys. Thank you. So that's it. That's my report, and let's go to the next one by my co-member. Thank you and God bless.
So, Biag ni Lamang. The pre-Hispanic epic poem Biag ni Lamang was written by the Ilocano people of the Philippines. The story was passed down orally for centuries before being written down in 1640, presumably by Pedro Bucaneg. So, Pedro Bucaneg is the person behind the epic Biag ni Lamang. And one fact about him is, he is a blind Ilocano board. So, who are the characters on the epic? So, first is Don Juan, the father of Lamang, Namongan, mother of Lamang, Ines Canoyan, the wife of Lamang, Sumarang, the rival of Lamang, and the pets that are friends of Lamang. And Lamang, the last one, the main character of the story. So the epic happened on the mountains and in the river of Amburayan. The values that we can have from the epic is bravery, as Lamang shows on the story, that he will do anything just for Ines and seek justice for his father, and he also beat all his rivals. The tradition that we Filipinos sometimes followed, especially to those people who belongs to a tribe, are dowry, or asking money before marriage, and asking the hand for marriage, or pamamanhikan, and the last one is protecting one's territory. Several facts of human life are reflected in the epic. These realities illustrate some Filipino attitude, features, and beliefs, particularly among Filipino who were responsible for the creation and popularization of this incredible epic, such as valuing family and valuing friendship. Lamang valued his father very much, that even he doesn't know whether his father is still alive or not, he still seek justice for him. And friendship, that no matter what happened, the pet friends of Lamang still seek for him and save him from the death. So that's all.
And now let us go on and discuss one of the most well-known write-up here in Philippines that was written by Manuel L. Quezon. And the title of this write-up is called Grow and Be Like the Mulave. Allow me to read, and I apologized in advance that I will get stuttered, but nevertheless, it is said in Grow and Be Like the Mulave, national strength can only be built on character. A nation is nothing less than its citizenry. It is the people that make up the nation. Therefore, I cannot be strong than its component parts. Their weaknesses, it is failing. Their strength is of women and men, healthy in mind and body, courteous, brave, industrious, self-reliant, purposeful in thought as well in action, imbued with the sound of patriotism and profound in the sense of righteousness, with high social ideas and strong morals and fiber, and I will show you a nation that will not be submerged. A nation that will emerge victorious from the trials and bitter strife of a distracted world. A nation that will forever sharing the common task of advancing the welfare and promoting the happiness of mankind. The upward climb of mankind has been universal. In the human landscape, there are peaks and valleys and deep chasms. Generally, there is a need of patent social upheaval, volcanic in proportion to raise the lower levels to great heights. The battle for existence and survival of the fittest is ever the rule of life in nature and among men. Our task, it is heroic task to awaken and apply these faculties so that people should become what of right they should be, and morally virile, hardworking, refined, enterprising, persevering, public-spirited. I want our people to grow and be like the Mulave, strong and resilient in rising the hillside, unafraid of the raging flood, the lightning or the storm, confident of its own if we have the will to survive and the will to achieve social efficiency, we cannot deny this task of the spiritual revival. Let us begin now to mold the typical Filipino. We are Oriental. Orientals are known for their placidity and passivity. In the world of humanity, we look upon as a quiet and smooth lake from which the adventurous enterprising may reap enjoyment and gain. I refuse to allow the Filipinos to be so regarded. We shall be a flowing stream, a rippling brook, a deep and roaring torrent, full of life, full of hope, of faith, and of strength. Through self-discipline, we shall harness all of our energies so that our power, spreading all over and breadth of this land, will develop its resources, advance its culture, secure its social justice, and give puissance to the nation, and ensure happiness and contentment for all the people under the aegis of liberty and peace. And to share my perspective to you, what is the Grow and Be Like the Molave? It is written by Manuel Quezon, and he calls up all of us Filipinos, a whole nation. He reminded us what is the appropriate thing in order for our country to reach its maximum, their capability of making our motherland more successful. He reminded us that we should not only be still as the lake, from my perspective, still as the lake, but instead we should be the brook in Cebuano Sapa river that is constantly flowing, giving life, giving hope. How about you? Are you someone who is continually giving hope and giving faith and reflecting good or optimistic manners and approaches in life that everyone can see in you? To paraphrase that, are you inspiring someone to be their better selves in under the love of with a hint of patriotism? Are we that person? Manuel L. Quezon calls us to be someone who can encourage other people in that manner. About the author. As we know, Manuel L. Quezon, he is the first president of Philippines, and in full name, Manuel Quezon is Manuel Luis Quezon E. Molina, and he was born around August 19, 1878. His birthplace was in Baler, Philippines. His education, he cut short his law studies at the University of Santo Tomas de Manila in 1899 and participated in the struggle for independence against the United States and led by, you guessed it right, Emilio Aguinaldo. Then, after that, Quezon returned to the university and obtained his degree around 1903 and practiced law for few years. His contributions: he is a Filipino statesman, leader of the independence movement, and the first president of the Philippine Commonwealth established under U.S. tutelage in 1935. He is way to independence and was through cooperation with the United States. He ran for governor in Tayabas province in 1905. Once elected, he served for 2 years before being elected a representative in 1907 to the newly established Philippine Assembly. He was also appointed as resident commissioner for the Philippines, entitled to speak but not to vote in U.S. House of Representatives. Washington D.C., and he fought vigorously for the speedy grant of independence by the United States. He was also one of the reasons that we gain liberty from United States. Quezon played a major role in obtaining Congress passage in 1916 of the Jones Act, which pledged independence for the Philippines without giving a specific date when it would take effect. The act gave Philippines greater autonomy and provided for the creation of a bicameral national legislature modeled after the U.S. Congress. Then Quezon resigned as commissioner and returned to Manila to be elected to the newly formed Philippine Senate in 1916. He subsequently served its presidency as its president until 1935, and in 1922 he gained control to the Nacionalista Party, which previously been led by his rival Sergio Osmeña. And that was all regarding of the author and the write-up Grow and Be Like the Molave. Thank you.
So before we proceed, what is Philippine mythology or Philippine myth? It is attempt to explain the nature of the world through the lives and actions of heroes, deities, referred to as Anito or Diwata in some ethnic groups, and mythological creatures. Philippine mythology is the body of stories and epics originating from and part of the indigenous Philippines folk regions, which include various ethnic faiths distinct from one another. So, Philippine mythology is incorporated from various sources. The majority of these myths were passed on through oral traditions and preserved through the aid of community spiritual leaders or shamans, or what we call Babaylan, Katalunan, Mumbaki, Baglan, Machanito, Walian, and Manguba. So, good day everyone. The next is Philippine myth example. So, we have first the creation by Igorot. So, in the beginning, there were no people on the earth. Lumawig, the great spirit, came down from the sky and cut many reeds. He divided us into pairs, which he placed in different parts of the world, and then he said to them, "You must speak." Immediately, the reeds became people, and in each place was a man and a woman who could talk, but the language of each couple differed from that of the others. Then Lumawig commanded each man and woman to marry, which they did. By and by, there were many children, all speaking the same language as their parents. These, in turn, married and had many children. In this way, there came to be many people on the earth. So now, Lumawig saw that there were several things which the people on the earth needed to use, so he set to work to supply them. He created salt and told the inhabitants of one place to boil it down and sell it to their neighbors. But these people could not understand the directions of the Great Spirit, and the next time he visited them, they had not touched the salt. Then he took it away from them and gave it to the people of a place called Mayinit. This did as he directed, and because of this, he told them that they should always be owners of the salt and that the other people must buy of them. Then Lumawig went to the people of Bontok and told them to get clay and make pots. They got the clay, but they did not understand the molding, and the jars were not well shaped. Because of their failure, Lumawig told them that they would always have to buy their jars, and he removed the pottery to Samuki. When he told the people there what to do, they did just as he said, and their jars were well shaped and beautiful. Then the Great Spirit saw that they were fit owners of the pottery, and he told them that they should always make many jars to sell. So in this way, Lumawig taught the people and brought to them all the things which they now have. So these Igorots, are called Cordillerans, is the collective name of several Austronesian ethnic groups in the Philippines who inhabitants mountain of Luzon.
So at a place called Kagubatan at the foot of the sacred mountain Mugao in eastern Lepanto is a small lake full of sacred eels which the people guard with great care. They believe that if these eels were killed, the springs would all dry up and they would have no water for their terraced rice fields. The eels are fed every day with rice and sweet potatoes by the children of the village, who, as they approach the lakilet, sing a peculiarly sweet and mournful song, upon hearing which the eels all rise to the surface of the water and approach the shore to receive their food. So the Igorots have a high code of morals which is closely associated with their religious belief. They also have a scientific calendar and a considerable knowledge of astronomy which has affected many modifications in their religions. Their mythology is extensive and they have a rich unwritten literature of epic poems, hero stories, and historical legends. So the next myth example is the flood story by Igorot again. So once upon a time, when the world was flat and there were no mountains, there lived two brothers, sons of Lumawig, the Great Spirit. The brothers were fond of hunting, and since no mountains had formed, there was no good place to catch wild pig and deer. And the older brother said, "Let us cause water to flow over all the world and cover it, and then mountains will rise up." So they caused water to flow over all the earth. And when it was covered, they looked the head basket, a bamboo basket in which the heads of victims are kept prior to the head-taking celebration of the town, and set it for a trap. The brothers were very much pleased when they went to look at their trap, for they had caught not only many wild pigs and deer, but also many people. Now Lumawig looked down from his place in the sky and saw that his sons had flooded the earth, and that in all the world there was just one spot which was not covered. And he saw that all the people in the world had been drowned except one brother and sister who lived in Pukis. Then Lumawig descended and he called to the boy and girl, saying, "Oh, you are still alive." "Yes," answered the boy, "we are still alive, but we are very cold." So Lumawig commanded his dog and deer to get fire for the boy and girl. The dog and the deer swam quickly away, but though Lumawig waited a long time, they did not return, and all the time the boy and girl were growing colder. Finally, Lumawig himself went after the dog and the deer, and when he reached them, he said, "Why are you so long in bringing the fire to Pukis? Get ready and come quickly while I watch you, for the boy and girl are very cold." Then the dog and the deer took the fire and started to swim through the flood. But when they had gone only a little way, the fire was put out. Lumawig commanded them to get more fire, and they did so, but they swam only a little way again when that of the deer went out, and that of the dog would have been extinguished, also had not Lumawig gone quickly to him and taken it. So as soon as Lumawig reached Pukis, he built a big fire which warmed the brother and sister, and the water evaporated so that the world was it was before, except that now there were mountains. The brother and sister married and had children, and thus there came to be many people on the earth. So the last myth example is how the moon and the stars came to be. This is from Mindanao, Bukidnon. So one day in the times when the sky was close to the ground, a spinster went out to pound rice. Before she began her work, she took off the beads from around her neck and the comb from her hair and hung them on the sky, which at that time looked like coral rock. Then she began working, and each time that she raised her pestle into the air, it struck the sky. For some time, she pounded the rice and then she raised the pestle so high that it struck the sky very hard. Immediately, the sky began to rise, and it went up so far that she loosed her ornaments. Never did they come down, for the comb become the moon, and the beads are the stars that are scattered about.
So the next topic is about folk tales, or the folk tales in the Philippines. First, what is folk tales? So folk tales are stories in the oral tradition, or tales that people teach each other out loud rather than stories in written form. They are closely related to many storytelling traditions, including fables, myths, and fairy tales. A folk tale is an old story that's been told again and again, often for generations. If you're interested in learning more about your heritage, you might read some folk tales from the country in which your great great grandparents grew. Every human society has its own folk tales. These well known stories handed down between generations. These are important way of passing along knowledge, informations, and history. The first folk tale that I will share to you is about or entitled Toko and the Birds, a tale from Philippines by Shirley Climo. This is the summary. Every night on Luzon, birds gathered in an abandoned hut on Mount Pinatubo, and their sleeping songs flows down to Maynilad, informing the villagers that it's time to prepare for bed. However, one night, the arrogant gecko Toko was defending, and Toko called. The cold was to awaken the winged creature every night, too tired to sing, and people about what to fall asleep. All the tricks the birds tries to bring Toko back to the swamping flashback until the eagle Haribon finally comes up with a plan to succeed. Encrusted with Filipino words defined in the text and glossary, the story of Climo is full of humor. After the birds describe Toko songs as volcano or earthquake and typhoon, he said, "I was great rice field." The watercolor illustration depict the village of the bamboo house and people living their daily fishing and food life preparation, and the game, the scene where Toko is happy to rub her belly after the eagle's feast of bees, is valuable because the plans of the colorful birds do not go well. So this fairy tale, Toko and the Birds, is a story about a Toko arriving in a peaceful small Philippine island, Luzon. This Filipino fable is about a noisy gecko called Toko who decided to stay in a small village where birds' songs filled the air. Toko's voice replaced the bird songs by repeatedly shouting his own name, depriving the villagers to sleep. Fortunately, the birds found a way to silence Toko, restoring the peace, quiet, and melodious singing of birds in the village. The second folk tale is entitled The Monkey and the Turtle. A very ancient and well-known animal tale is The Tortoise and the Monkey, made fun by Dr. Jose Perizal. It is about a tortoise and a monkey who planted halves of a banana tree, thinking that the upper part with leaves would bear fruit soon. The greedy monkey plants the upper half, but it withers. The tortoise, on the other hand, gets the ugly-looking lower portion of the roots, but it flourishes and soon is laden with fruits. The tortoise, however, cannot climb the tree to gather the fruits, so the monkey volunteers to pick them, but he eats all the bananas while he is up on the tree, throwing the skin down on the tortoise. Angry, the tortoise plants some pointed snails around the tree and hides under a coconut shell. The monkey comes down and gets his just desserts. Wounded and bleeding, he searches and finds the tortoise. As punishment, he gives the tortoise two choices: to be pounded with a mortar or to be thrown in the water. The clever tortoise chooses the mortar and deceives the monkey into thinking that he is afraid of drowning. The monkey throws the tortoise in the water, where the latter soon surfaces laughing. This tale is told by Ilocano is well known among both the Christianized and the wild tribes of the Philippines, and also in Borneo and Java. However, the Ilocano is the only version so far as known which has the explanatory element. The reason is given here why monkey do not eat meat. The turtle is accredited with extraordinary sagacity and cunning. It is another example of the type of tale showing the victory of the weak and cunning over the strong but stupid. The third folk tale and the last is entitled The Carabao and the Shell. One very hot day, when a carabao went into the river to bath, he met a shell and they began talking together. "You are very slow," said the carabao to the shell. "Oh no," replied the shell, "I can beat you in a race." "Then let us try and see," said the carabao. So they went out on the bank and started to run. After the carabao had gone a long distance, he stopped and called, "Shell." The other shell lying by the river answered, "Here I am." Then the carabao, thinking that it was the same shell with which he was racing, ran on. By and by he stopped again and called, "Shell." And another shell answered, "Here I am." The carabao was surprised that the shell could keep up with him, but he ran on, and every time he stopped to call, another shell answered. But he was determined that the shell should not beat him, so he ran until he dropped dead. So below are the resources of the folktales. Question is the Philippine literature surviving today? So Philippine literature is literature associated with the Philippines from prehistory through its colonial legacy and on to the present. Pre-Hispanic Philippine literature was actually epics passed on from generation to generation, originally through an oral tradition. So we can say that Philippine literature is still surviving from the group of works which are mostly grounded on traditional folktales, socio-political histories, and real-life experience, such as books have since promoted Filipino cultural values,
told daily struggles of locals and have instilled a remarkable lessons.